Hello everyone, my name is Michael Holman and I am the psychology instructor, your psychology instructor. This is for both Psychology 1101 and also Psychology 1010, so that's intro psychology as well as basic psychology. Today we're going to be talking about the critical thinking assignment and how to, well, get that done properly. A lot of you have asked me many questions and hopefully I'll get those resolved for you today. So let's go ahead and take a look. First of all, if you look under the Lessons tab, where all of our stuff is, you will see the critical thinking assignment and rubric for this assignment, that little folder right here. So, notice it says due April 27, 2015 by midnight. That is correct. So that means that by midnight of April 27th, so 27th, technically the 28th, so midnight of 28th. So that would mean that if it is April 27th, 11:59 p.m., you have 1 minute left to turn in your assignment. I hope that makes that as clear as possible. So let's see what we have in here. First of all, well, you see that there's a critical thinking assignment and rubric. Well, let's look at that first. So you click on that. So, design your own research study. The assignment, you'll notice it says to open, blah, blah, blah. I already have it open, so I'm good. Okay, but it's that little file that downloads, you'll need that as well. So the assignment is to complete a research study testing the psychological concept of your choice. You will conduct your research by surveying individuals that represent your designated population. You will work out your study and write your paper following APA format. Data analysis must be completed and include graphs and inferential statistics. Okay, so picking your topic, the first thing you have to do is figure out what you're going to do. For this project, you may choose to do an experiment, a correlation study, or a case study experiment answering any question related to psychology. You must collect your data using either a survey or naturalistic observation, and your method must meet the ethical criteria set by the IRB, which is me. IRB means it's the Internal Review Board. The ethics. I have to determine that what you're doing is ethical. So that should be your primary concern at first, is coming up with an idea and saying, hey, will this work? In every case, I guarantee you, I will look at it and then tell you what can be improved. The reason I have this little stipulation here is I don't want you doing something that could harm someone. I don't want you doing anything with children. Because then we have to get parents involved in parental permission forms, and it's a big mess. So no kids. That's a big one right there. But you should always tell me what it is that you want to do, and I'll let you know how it can be improved, if it should. So what you're going to turn in will be a scientific paper describing your study. The paper should include the following: a title page, an abstract page, and then the actual study, which is composed of an introduction section, a method section, and a results section, as followed finally by the discussion section. Then you'll have a reference page. Okay, so the title page. Scientific titles are descriptive and may be long. It doesn't need to be clever or catchy, but can be, and it must describe what you've studied. So you can't just say, a scientific survey of psychology. That's not going to cut it, and you know it. So don't do it. I will count off. Abstract. The abstract is a brief overview of the entire paper. We're talking a paragraph. That's it. And it has a page all to itself. Although it's the beginning of the paper, you should write it last. Why? Because it's going to sum up everything that your paper says. The abstract is like the back of a book cover. So that when you read the back of a book to figure out whether you actually want to buy that book, that's what the abstract is. That's what we use abstracts for in psychological research papers, or research papers in general. We look at abstracts so that we can determine whether it has anything to do with what we're currently researching on. So, your abstract should include 1 to 2 sentences on each of the following: a summary of the background research from your intro, statement of the topic of your study, just say whatever you're looking at, and a statement of your hypothesis, also from your intro. Summarize your results. Those are the results of everything that you just did. And then a comment from discussion. Usually 150 words or less, so not a big deal. Just save it for last to summarize what you've done. Next, you'll have your introduction section. The introduction contains detailed background information on your topic. That means you have to research your topic. Some people have been asking, do I need to research? Yes, this is a research paper. That means you must research for your topic. You must have a statement of your topic with a compelling argument for why this topic is interesting or relevant. So why do you want to study this in the first place? Okay, now what do you believe is going to happen? That's the statement of your hypothesis. So if you're doing a study to see whether someone, well, let's say that you're doing a study on people that have been cheating in relationships. Okay, and you want to see whether they believe that other people will cheat as well, if they believe that cheating is natural, blah, blah, blah. Well, your hypothesis could be that you believe that individuals that admit to cheating have a higher, scored higher on a lack of believing other people are telling the truth, or anything of that, or a lack of trust in others. That would be better. They have significantly less trust in others than people who said that they had never cheated on anyone. That's just an example. Let's see. So that was the hypothesis. You're going to have predictions for the results. So how do you? So your hypothesis was that you believe that they will have less trust in other people, and your predictions are that, well, this is exactly what's going to happen. What supports your hypothesis? And a rationale. Rationale meaning how you believe the predictions are going to flow from the hypothesis. So you think that most people that take your survey are going to answer this way, blah, blah, blah. You should always have your background research cited with complete bibliographical information in a reference list at the end of the paper. We'll get to that in a second. But point is, during your introduction section, this is when you write your, this is when you put all those citations in. So everything that you've been referencing is going to be in the introduction section. It really has no other place to be. Maybe in the discussion section at the very end, but for the purposes of this paper, yes, just the intro section. That's where all your research should go. And also to help you come up with, a topic and what you're going to talk about. So, after you've done your introduction, you should have a method section. This section details exactly, notice that is underlined, it details exactly how the researcher conducted the study and who served as participants. How many were male? How many were female? How many were black? How many were white? How many were Asian? What were their ages? Did you take into account socioeconomic status? Did you take into account education? What sort of demographic questions did you ask? All the information necessary to repeat the study generally appears in this section. The method section includes information about apparatus or instrumentation that was used for both the independent and dependent variables, the complete procedure used to administer the independent variable, control confounding variables. Confounding variables, remember, if you remember from studying and whatnot, confounding variables are anything that could mess up your survey and make your results not reliable or not valid. So how did you control for that? For example, if you are looking into the beliefs of cheaters versus non-cheaters and it turns out that someone lied about not cheating, that could be a confounding variable. So how do you control for that? Also measure the dependent variable as described in this section. This is also where you will explain how you fulfilled ethical obligations such as informed consent, confidentiality, and debriefing. A copy of your standardized procedures should be included either in the text of the method section or as an appendix referenced in the method section. If you use a survey or part of a survey from another source, you must include, you must include an internal citation and list the source in the reference section. Okay. So this one has a lot of detail. I've been fielding this question a lot lately. Basically, you don't have to include your actual survey, but the method section is going to have the questions that you asked in it. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. Basically, the point is that you're going to ask specific questions. And you're going to ask things like demographic questions. Demographic questions are, what is your race? What is your age? What is your gender? What is your level of education? Any of those sorts of things that you ask them. And then you're going to ask them questions like, whatever is pertaining to your actual topic. So you might ask, well, if you're doing the cheater one that I've been using as an example, you might ask them what their level of trust is on a scale of 1 to 7. That's part of the method section. You would write a paragraph explaining, I asked them on a scale of 1 to 7 to rate how strongly they agreed with things, and the statements included things like this. And then you list in a little quote all the little questions that you asked in your actual survey. The whole point of the method section is that if I'm a researcher and I were to magically pull up your paper, I would be able to replicate what you did exactly. Now, this is another important factor. If you go and use an online survey, which we'll talk about in a little bit, then that means that you just have to say that they were provided a link and asked to click on the link, which took them to the survey using SurveyMonkey.com or Quick Survey, whatever you use. And yeah, and also, this, like I said, this is the part where you talk about ethical obligations. Remember, one of your ethical obligations is you have to have informed consent from everyone taking the test. So if you're doing a paper survey, that means that every participant must first sign an informed consent form. If you're not doing a paper survey, if you're doing a SurveyMonkey or any sort of other, or the Quick Survey, the online surveys, they don't have to sign an informed consent form. By clicking on the link, they are giving their consent. So you just have to mention that if it was online or if it was paper. And if it was paper, you have to mention that you provided the consent forms and signed them, etc., etc. All consent forms were kept confidential because you don't want people's information getting out. This is very important. It must remain anonymous. All of that goes in the method section. Once you've done your method section, we move on to the results section. This is where a researcher reports what they've found. They include data tables, graphs, statistical information, in addition to a written summary for the results. Tables and graphs should be labeled, such as Table 1, and include a caption explaining what this particular graph is showing. This is where you tell me what the results of your survey were. So how many people did this? How many people agreed that, or said that they had trust issues? How many people said that they were, how many participants were male? How many were female? How many participants said that they admitted to being a cheater or said that they were not a cheater, etc., etc., etc. All of that goes in the results section. So you're kind of a little, just the demographics are getting kind of recapped a little bit here. But mainly, you're talking about the results. So you'll say that of the, say, 25 participants, 13 were female, and of those 13 females, 7 said that they had never cheated on anyone. Okay. That's part of it. They're part of that little group. Of the females that participated in this study that said that they had not cheated on anyone, there's a significant difference in their trust issues or whatever. You get the idea. Once you've gone over all the results, then you discuss how relevant this is to the world. Why is this study important? So this discussion section contains 3 main things. A conclusion statement with, was the hypothesis supported? So remember that hypothesis you said in your intro? Well, did it support it? Yes or no? Then critique the study. So what could you have done about the study to make it better? What was good about the study? The bulk of the discussion focuses on number 2, the critique. In your critique, analyze the strength of your conclusion by identifying possible sources of error or bias in your experiment, and explain how these may have affected your data. You may also include alternate explanations for how to interpret your results. All of that goes in the critique. This is where you discuss, how relevant it is to future studies on this. Does it match up with the research that you've already done, or does it go against it entirely? The third part of the discussion should be just a few recommendations for how you could change this study in the future, or for a different study related to what you're talking about, and how you could study on that instead. Once you've done the discussion group page, or setting, the discussion section, then you have the reference page. The reference page should have parenthetical citation, so author and then date, and that's how you'll cite them within your intro section. All sources must be listed alphabetically by last name of the first author with the second line of each citation indented. You may use a bibliography tool such as this link to help you. Select APA format. So I don't mind you going to the internet and using a tool like that. You can look up citation machine, APA citation machine as well, if you'd like, stuff like that. Now logistics. Logistics is its own thing entirely. This is not a section, this is something that runs throughout the paper. Your entire paper should always be in 12-point font, have 1-inch margins, avoid passive voice. Refer to English class to understand what that is. Each section should be separated and headed with an intro section. There should be parenthetical notation, mentioned before. Tables and graphs are labeled and captioned. Sample size must be 25, so you must have at least 25 participants. No ifs, ands, or buts. If you don't, I will come down on you hard. And you must submit all consent forms with your paper to receive credit. Again, if you use online stuff, you don't have to worry about that. If you are going to use consent forms, then you'll need to, well, if you have a class with me, an actual physical class with me, I should say, you will be allowed to turn those consent forms in person. Otherwise, if that's not an option for you, then feel free to scan your consent forms. It's going to be really the only thing you can do, is you have to scan those consent forms, upload them onto a file, and then email it to me. And that'll be the best way to do it, because you're not going to be able to turn it in with the actual assignment. And don't bother attaching it at the end. It'll probably be too big, so don't worry about that. So just scan all your consent forms and send them as a file to me, as a single file, probably like a PDF or something. But again, if you use an online source, you don't have to worry about consent forms, so you don't have to worry about that aspect as well. Okay, so that was me talking a lot. That's kind of a theme for this video. But you'll note, if you might remember, there was a document that downloaded. Well, here it is. This is what downloads. A lot of it's the same, but it kind of breaks it down a little bit easier for you. So look at this. Notice how it says almost the exact same thing that was said before. But notice it says title, person 1. Scientific titles are descriptive, may be long, blah, blah, blah. Person 3 does this, person 1 does this, person 2 does this. It goes into good detail about what is expected of you. Person 3 does this. Well, this is the idea, because typically this would be a 3-person job. But you guys have to do it all on your own. So yeah, don't feel like that's unfair, because I had to do it when I was a student. I have done many of these papers by myself, so it's easily doable. So yes, you're doing this all on your own, but what does that tell you? That tells you this is not the kind of paper that you need to wait until the last minute to do. It's just not going to be good for you. So maybe you should write your introduction section first. Get started on that already. Once you've done your survey, you can write up your method section. Once you've analyzed your results, you can do that, and then you can discuss everything. Maybe after you've done your intro section, you could go ahead and get started making your reference page. You could also go ahead and have your title page, which is right over here. So all of this is stuff that can be done, probably should be done ahead of time. The more you get done ahead of time, the easier your life is going to be. I'm telling you. Of course, people don't listen. So, that was the rubric. So, okay, that's a lot of information, but the first thing you need to do is figure out what you're going to do. What is my survey going to be? Okay, well, let's click on this link that says possible surveys to conduct. And we're going to get a list of surveys in a second. And this is just a list. Notice it does not actually give you surveys. You can look up these surveys and download them if you'd like to do them that way. Just make sure to reference them in your reference page. Or, if you get inspired, you can make your own. I am completely fine with you just doing that, making your own. That's fine. But these are just a list of surveys, gives you ideas. If you're having trouble not doing anything of these that you want to do, okay, then talk to me. See what you can come up with. One of the things you have to understand, though, what you need to think about is when thinking of a survey, okay, am I going to be able to get 25 people to agree to take a survey about this? Am I going to be able to do that? If you think it's unlikely that you'll be able to get 25 people, you probably shouldn't do it. Should you, for example, I've had students that have asked, well, what if I did a survey on bipolar people? I go, okay, well, you know, that's fine. So you're asking attitudes about bipolar people? No, I'm asking, I want to survey 25 bipolar people. And I say, okay, can you get not just 25 bipolar people, but 25 bipolar people that are willing to discuss their condition and discuss whatever your topic is? If the answer is no, move on. Find something a lot easier. Why make life hard for yourself? Really? Okay, so those are some possible surveys that you can conduct. And then you ask, okay, well, what should be in my paper? You know, I really want a good rundown of it. Well, what do you know? Click on this link that says what should be in my paper, and I have a template for you. Give me just a second. Don't know why it pops like that. All right. So the first page of your paper should be the title page, where you state your thesis as the little title. I mean, it's a title page. The next page is just an abstract. Third page. From third page on is the bulk of your study. So the intro, and it has all this stuff in it. The method section, which is following immediately the intro section, and then the results section following immediately the method section, and then the discussion section, which follows immediately the results section. And then you have an entirely new page that is your works cited or your reference page. So that's what that's about. That's how it works. You notice it has these ideas. Now it says last sentence for under methods, what inferential statistical test you used. Well, if you are using a recommended test that you found off the internet that I recommended to you, then that's where you would list it. That's where you would show it. But if you're making one of your own, which most of you are from what I gather, which is great, I love that, then you're going to have to show me what sort of questions you asked, so that I don't just go, okay, yeah, sure, they totally did this. They didn't just make up some numbers and call it results. I need you to show me what you actually did. Prove it. So that's the kind of things I'm looking for in the paper. Now, that's what should be in the paper, but before we get to the paper, you got to do a survey. Okay, well, how do I create a survey? Click on this link. It will take you to this website, this free website called Quick Surveys. That will help you. Again, if you use either this one or this one, SurveyMonkey, they're both free. They both have differences. The differences being SurveyMonkey has a lot of varieties in the way that you can ask questions and set up answer keys, but you can only do 10 questions. That's including demographics. That's the catch there, unless you want to pay for it. Whereas with Quick Survey, you're given unlimited questions, but they only give you 3 formats for questions. So it's really up to you which one you want to do. So those are how you create them. And if you use these online ones, you don't have to worry about a consent form. But if you make up your own, if you print out your own, then you have to use a consent form. This consent form, you just click on it, you download it, you open it. It comes out, and you print it. And notice how it says Psych 1101 or Psych 1010. That should be changed depending on which class you're in. So basic people, don't worry, yours will be for the appropriate one. Intro people, don't worry, yours is correct. It's the same information, regardless. It's just a consent form. Make sure they all fill that out and bring it back somehow. Now, here's an example of a completed paper. This is probably the most useful link in all of the ones in the folder. With this link, this is how you would write a title page. All of this is important. Every single thing. I am going to go over your papers with a fine-tooth comb, and if anything is not like this, I'm going to count off points for it. Notice your abstract right there. Notice how that was the running head. See how that's like that? correlation study of different, and then you come up here, said running head, correlation study of different. So it was different for the first page. Moving on. Then you got your little title, you've got your intro, page numbers, all of that. Notice how from intro on, it just bleeds right into the method section, which bleeds right into the results section. Notice how we talk about gender and marital status and children, whatever is relevant, whatever the demographic questions were that you asked for people. All of that gets mentioned in the results section. Notice there are graphs. You'll need to make these. Notice there is a discussion section. And then it ends, and you talk in the final part of the discussion section for how future topics that would be fascinating to research that are related to your current topic. And then you have a reference page at the very end that is just like this. Notice how everything is indented over. Notice how you've got this like this. Everything is in alphabetical order. All of this is important. If you did research, if it wasn't your original idea, and it better not be, then you put it in here, in your reference page. All of this is important. And this is how you do it. So if I were you, I would model as closely as I possibly could my paper after this example paper. Very important. And then, once everything is done, once you've sent me your consent forms if you're doing that, or not if you're using an online site, you will turn it in. Go to the Turn It In Critical Thinking Assignment and click on that. Do this by midnight of April 27, 2015, and you will be all set. That's really all there is to it. So again, if you have any questions, hopefully this has answered a lot of questions for you guys, but if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I am available. I am happy to help you guys and answer questions that you may have, to accept or reject ideas. Hopefully you guys have already started on this, because this is a big project and I have been talking about it all semester long. So if you haven't been working on it, it's entirely on your own shoulders for doing that. So with all of that said, thank all of you for watching this video. Hopefully you understood quite a good bit. If you have any more questions, feel free to email me, but in the meantime, have a good evening. Good luck.